Hey everybody, welcome back to Into the Veil. I'm glad you could join us this evening. This is Rachel. I've got my awesome husband Ken with me to help me. For those of you that are new, we've spent several months studying Sasquatch here at the house and have developed a sound, or a sound as we can imagine, relationship with them. About a week ago, the energy of one who calls himself Onku, which is actually a shortened version for a much longer name, came through energetically. For me, it was channeling, much of which is through my own thought process, what I see in my mind's eye, and he uses both. He's very much a part of the clan that we've been working with, and up until lately, we've been primarily dealing with what he identifies as his son, and we call him Junior. We've had a lot of activity from him, but Anku relayed that recently he became what we would term a new elder. In that, I felt very deeply that they lost one that had been with them for a very long time, and the term that was given to me was transitioned. That could relate to death, that could relate to moving into a different dimension entirely. I'm not sure, but it seems that Onku has taken it upon himself to fill this position, and part of his path is to help reunite man and these people. So, in an attempt to hopefully fulfill part of my own path working and his, I've agreed to channel whatever information he might be willing to bring to us. So if you'll bear with me, it's much easier for me, for whatever reason, if Ken asks me these questions. There's something about the sound of it that makes my receptivity easier. And if you have any questions, I do hope you will let us know. All right.
Well, I guess that is kind of explanatory, and that brings us to the first question that one of the viewers had, and that was Sally. She wanted to know if Anku spoke to you directly, or if he operated through some of your spirit guides that you have, or if you could explain, or if he could explain any of that any more in depth.
In response to that, he says much of it is through Mindspeak. It is direct. If he lacks the right words, or isn't sure of how I would receive his energy, there's something about an energetic charge. So he keeps just a little distance. It's not huge, to keep from overwhelming me with his energy. And I do feel my guides, angels, monitoring my energy levels as we communicate to make sure that it's not too much for my nervous system. And sometimes you will find that I will start a little bit in speaking, and I think that's where those points are coming in, is that it's kind of a monitoring system to slow the flow, because he does have an immense amount of energy.
And we should also clarify that Anku is the one that we call Big Daddy when we're out
Yes.
in the woods.
Yes, he
And
verified
he
that.
is an actual, physical, living
Yes,
Sasquatch person.
he is.
He is not in the spirit realm.
This is correct. He says he's very much alive. He's kind of chuckling. His energy is not really making fun of us, but he understands our questions. Um, he travels a lot in what he calls other form, but no, technically he is alive.
Well, we have a question from Montney, and he'd like to know how Anku presents himself to you, how you see him in your mind, or how he presents himself to you when you're speaking to him.
Mostly I sense his energy, colors. I see a lot of green, white. There are hints, it's almost iridescent, almost rainbowish in the sense that it almost holds a prismatic aura about it. It, for moments, sometimes it's almost like looking into a kaleidoscope, the way that it moves and changes. But it's really lovely as far as the color spectrum, and it has this burst effect. I don't know how to explain that. That's what I mean when I say kaleidoscope. It's like the pattern, it almost has a burst to it. Can you repeat the question?
Well, I think you pretty much summed it
Did I
up.
get it?
You
Okay.
see him as a light energy, a prismatic kaleidoscope of color.
Once in a blue moon, he'll let me pick up on he is red, and he will let me just see hints of what he would look like physically, as if to say, if you see me, you'll know me. It's almost like a way for me to get used to the idea of what his physicality would look like given the opportunity to see him.
I have a question from Cheryl, and she was curious to know that if they're susceptible to the same diseases as humans when they're in their physical form.
He said in the physical form, very much so. Some things they have a higher tolerance against because of, he said, diet and natural immunity. They have a better immunity towards some things than we do. Other things they have a lesser immunity toward. Most of all, he's showing me an energetic field around a person, as if to say illness is often carried in energy. He said many of you don't remember this, but it is an energy that attacks your body, a thought pattern, a feeling repetitively, and it will weaken your field if it's against you. He's got more. He's reminding me that when in this pandemic, as we call it, energetically they all collectively took a step back because they understood that even if a person didn't have a physical illness, it could hinder or linger on the outside of their energy field. And depending on how large an individual's energy field was, would determine how far they needed to be removed from them. For some more, for some less.
Well, next question that I have on this list is from Carol and Bill King, and they wanted to know if food was a necessity or a pleasurable experience, and did they need food on the same level that human beings do, or can they withdraw from eating? I guess that means if they're in the physical, do they need food? If they're not in the physical form, do they abstain from it?
Right. What he's showing me is in that we call it a cloaked form where they're not showing themselves physically, for example, but you can see an image or their energetic impression. He's saying often they will, if food is short, they will use their energetic field more, less physical, in other words, because they don't have to have a lot of food to maintain it. There's something about their metabolism that shifts with that. If they're in a physical form more often, they have to have more food, more meat, more. Um, he's saying we can use plants and get plenty of protein by staying in an energetic place. But if we chose to be more physical, we would need more raw protein, more meat, more, he said, but nuts and berries and grasses, sweet grasses, he mentions, maintain these guys most often. Was that all that one?
Yeah.
I get lost in. Oh, he's not done. He's saying vibrationally, even humans, the more they transcend, the more they elevate their vibration, the less food they require. Um, Again, it has to do with the metabolism and oscillating. I think he's done. Okay.
Paint Palo asks the question if there are other types or varieties of them and if they exist worldwide.
He said very much so. They are. They weren't. He's saying once the lands were together a very long time ago, and as the lands separated, they separated with the lands. Um, he's saying something about they have family, as he calls it. He's showing me India, parts of Australia, and feels like China or Russia, but somewhere up. But they are most akin to these people. There are different types, though, and some, although they're all aware of what goes on with other people, they aren't all alike in the way. Sorry, one second. They're not all alike in the way they live, in the way they have studied man. Some haven't had the same ability to really understand man, such as these. It's
If some are in a more isolated region,
that's the feeling I get.
they
Yes.
wouldn't interact as much.
But they aren't necessarily violent. They just would be more standoffish, more afraid, instinctually concerned.
So I guess that would lead into the next part of the question, is if there's different body types or different attitudes, or I'm thinking that's what he's asking.
Say it one more time for me.
Are there different body types? Are some bigger, some smaller?
Yes, very much so. There's some up north he's shown me that are huge. Like, we just think these guys are big, and they are. But there are some that make them feel very small. And much like man has changed in his form, you know, what I'm seeing is how people once might have been smaller and have become larger. Sometimes it's just breeding, you know. There are some, they don't, the word I get is claim. And what I feel is that these are much smaller, much more aggressive, they're not focused on evolving. I get the sense of no soul, no conscience is a better word. Their thinkability is very animalistic, is what he's saying. Instinctual, not spiritual.
So would he be able to tell us which parts of the world or which parts of the country they're most likely to be in?
He's saying the word south. So I'm trying to get clarification if that means south of us, if that means southern regions of the world, like below the equator.
Or maybe just hotter climates?
It feels to me that barometrics play into this, but also food sources.
So what I'm hearing is, in people terms, the heat makes you crazy. So would these be the ones we refer to as something like a skunk ape or a wood booger, the southern variety of a Bigfoot? Is that who he's referring to?
Skunk ape resonates more than the term wood booger, although they're very close. He said they're not quite the same. He said we would be the type you understand to have had positive experiences with Native Americans, with tribes of ancient past. I don't know of these tribes, but apparently somebody does. We would be a greater consciousness to our people, but so many are still in that process.
So Anku would be of the ones that were referred to as the big brother.
He's anxious for everybody to know, but he knows not everybody is ready to know, so he's kind of giving lightened. I feel him pulling back a little, like he doesn't want to be a waterfall. He doesn't want to drown them with information.